Welcome to this Killick Explains video, and welcome to the fourth video in my tax saving basics series. For those people wondering what the first three were, what is an ISA was number 1, what is a JISA was number 2, what is a SIPP was number 3. So a question a lot of people ask in this fourth one is, how do I decide? ISA better, SIPP better, how do you make that decision? Okay, so a bit of background first of all, and then I'll give you an answer. Saving tax efficiently is incredibly important. Why? Well, thanks to the recent autumn statement in 2022, some of the other ways of saving tax, if you like, apart from these tax wrappers, are going to get less generous. Allowances are being either frozen or cut. Increasingly, we can't rely on the state or our employers to provide nice, generous final salary pensions like the so-called good old days. And life is getting more expensive, so we've got to find a way of maximising saving and maximising the tax we save while we're doing it. Examples abound. School fees seem to be rising all the time for those people paying private school fees. University costs rising all the time for those people trying to get a degree. The cost of life after work seems to keep rising, which is why people are often working longer, going back to work in their 50s and so on. And of course, things like later life care costs, which a lot of people don't have to consider, are mounting all the time too. So the sooner we get cracking, the better. Now, which of the wrappers I've talked about for adults, ISAs or SIPPs, is better? I'm going to cover a lot of ground here in a short space of time, so a reference source coming up at the end for more information. So individual savings accounts, covered them in more detail in an earlier video. So what are the key advantages? Number one, they're super flexible. They're flexible both in terms of you can put money in whenever you like and however you like. You can take it back out again, albeit that can come at a future tax penalty potentially, whenever you like and however much you like. They're fairly simple to understand in most cases. There's a generous annual allowance, £20,000 per person is enough for most people. And it looks as though, never say never, the rules are unlikely to change for the time being. Successive governments seem to have committed to this, although that could be famous last words, because the rules could be changed, in theory, any time. Now, what about self-invested personal pensions? Again, this is a shortcut straight to the relative advantages. Well, here you've got tax relief on the way in at your marginal income tax rate, whether that's 20%, 40% or 45%. You've got a tax-free lump sum on the way out, potentially, whether taken all in one go or whether taken in stages. You've got the ability of an employer to make a contribution, okay, and that's something you don't have with an ISA. And you've got a minimum lock-up period insofar as you can't take the funds out until you're 55. And some people would say, well, there's a downside, surely, Tim, but actually that can be a good thing. Forcing people to make some provision for later life is not necessarily bad news. Now, what about some twists, like I've done in the previous videos? Other things to think about other than a straight comparison of advantages, if you like. ISAs do attract inheritance tax the way the rules stand at the moment. They are part of a death estate, whereas SIPPs don't. But on the other hand, self-invested personal pensions are more complicated. They're not as straightforward to understand. There are extra tricky rules to get your head around, like the lifetime allowance, like tapering of contributions, for example. And there is always speculation that the government might change the rules every time a budget or statement comes around. Now, they haven't so far, but it does seem to be a topic that is in potentially the eyesight of the government, although at the moment the rules have been the same for a while. Either way, I'm afraid both of these things are private, self-managed products in the sense that the responsibility is on a customer to work out what the best investment strategy under either wrapper might be. In terms of tax, by the way, some people ask me, is there a difference overall? Well, actually, yes. Self-invested personal pensions are a definite hands-down winner, particularly where somebody can get, say, higher rate relief on the way in as they're trying to build their fund for life after work, but then only suffers basic rate tax on the way out. And that's worth remembering. When you pull income out of a SIPP, it does attract tax, albeit you've got a personal allowance, and if the income only puts you in the basic rate tax threshold, then you've had a tax win over the life of the product, as it were. So what's my answer to the question, ISA or SIPP? Well, it's going to be a bit of a blended one, if you like. In an ideal world, you'd use both. For younger people, often prioritising an ISA over a SIPP can make sense, but don't forget, you're not normally going to get an employer's contribution into a SIPP, and if you're prioritising an ISA and sacrificing that contribution in the process, well, be careful. For older investors who've maybe got these things set up, it can sometimes make sense to pull down money from an ISA first, simply because under the current rules, ISAs are not inheritable by future generations in the same way that SIPPs are. So you can see it's kind of nuanced, if you like. There is no right answer. Ideally, have both, and then ideally be thoughtful about the way that you use them when it comes to a period in life when you may have to pull money out as opposed to pay money in. Above all, though, my closing message, and this is easier said than done, would be try not to sacrifice tax-effective saving to the current cost of living crisis. Saving works best over the long term, and tempting though it is to take away savings when people are trying to make their budget stack up, I would urge anyone watching this video to try to at least keep a minimum contribution going. Now, this has been quite a lengthy video. It's covered a lot of ground, so extra sources of information. Number one, my video library, killick.com/learn. The tabs on this side should help you find the tax-effective saving stuff, and or my guides, a couple probably most relevant here. One is the basic tax guide, which has got a blue cover, and then there is a guide on how to maximise the funds you're going to need when you either dial down or stop work. That has a purple cover, and in both cases, editor at killick.com.